Hey, and welcome back to another Spark Ninja podcast. It's Dave here. I thought the first episode that I'll probably cover from a technical perspective would have to cover SPDs. There are still questions on AFDDs, but everyone seems to have a question on SPDs with regards to the 18th edition. So, they've rewritten it, and there's obviously wording to the effect that we have to have SPDs in some circumstances, and then if those circumstances aren't applicable, then we have to decide via a risk assessment. But if we actually look at it carefully, so it says installations where because of the consequence of overvoltage protection is required, and the examples it gives is where there is a risk of serious injury to or loss of human life. So any site that has medical treatment, hospitals, care homes, maybe vulnerable persons, those will be coming under that remit. The other one is possible interruption to public service or damage to cultural heritage. Well, public services would be data centres, it would be banks probably, heritage buildings, museums, castles, any parks or trust buildings or anything. The third one, possible interruption of commercial or industrial activity. Isn't that just like everything else? Like factories, hotels, shopping centres and industry. What's not commercial or industrial? Office blocks, maybe? I don't know. Administrative areas? The fourth one is where it could affect a large number of co-located individuals. Again, an office block would be a large quantity of co-located individuals. Even residential towers, flats, because whilst we're not talking about the premises, we're talking here about the stairwells and the communal lighting and things like that. So it's kind of worded to the effect where it nearly probably would include all types of systems, but then goes on to say that if one of those scenarios isn't actually required, then if the installation's a dwelling, so we assume dwelling means a domestic, a small single unit, it could also be considered not necessary. The reason for this is it might be considered that the value of equipment that could be harmed from an overvoltage may not be as high as the value of the cost of the protection itself. Many manufacturers take a very, very different viewpoint on that, and I do have some content from one of the AFDD manufacturers to prove that, which I'll be putting onto an AFDD video very soon. So yeah, I mean SPDs are what, 60 to 85 pounds. I'm kind of guessing, but I'm assuming they're not much more than that. I'm assuming that many homes will have a lot of electrical equipment that exceeds that value. So they've kind of worded it to the effect of, they mention it so we don't have to think about it, but they're kind of putting the ball in our court with that. So anyway, we've got those four scenarios which we do need it, and if there's a dwelling environment, we have to maybe consider not having it. It then says, though, in all other cases, we've got to do this risk assessment, and this risk assessment is the stupid calculated risk level where we use an environmental factor, we use a lightning flash density map, and then we do the length of the underground high voltage, low voltage, overground high voltage, low voltage, or if we don't have the information, we just use 1 kilometre. It's just a load of nonsense, really. It really is worded in a way that kind of forces you into a funnel where you're going to just end up selecting SPDs, and I think that's why it's going this way. I think everyone's deciding, or they're concluding, that we do need RCDs, and maybe some that aren't are assuming domestic means no RCD. I think that's probably the difference. All other scenarios probably need SPDs these days with the way it's been worded, and if you translate what they mean, they don't say supermarkets, shopping centres, they don't say factories, office blocks, but you've got to interpret what commercial industrial activity means. You've got to interpret what a large number of co-located individuals actually is. They could help you with that a little bit, but they don't. They kind of leave the ball in your court. So we're now in this position where everyone's thinking about SPDs and everyone's installing SPDs, or their manufacturers are speccing out SPDs for, huzzah, a new fuse board called an 18th edition fuse board. What a wonderful thing that is. Which is a split load board with obviously an SPD installed between the main switch and the RCDs. It's installed at the front. There is a bit of debate about overcurrent protection. I saw on Twitter earlier today that was it Hager? They had a split load board with 100 amp RCDs, and they were obviously A type, which is another conversation. RCD types, which is another one we'll have. But they didn't provide overcurrent protection. They had a 6mm cable with no overcurrent protection, so technically it was 100 amp on that, and they haven't actually responded to that one yet. It's quite interesting. But yeah, to conclude, we looks like SPDs are here to stay, and looks like they're here for every install. I guess with the amount of technical and sensitive equipment, it's going to be inevitable. But I'll have to have a review of my my YouTube video to actually see how it's translated across, because we've got a lot more information now from the interpretation of this. We'll have to see what comes up. Anyway, that's talking about SPDs. Let me know through the channels if you want more information on how to select or connect them. Yeah, type 1 SPDs, type 2, type 3. Information should be available. It shouldn't be too challenging, but if it is, let me know. We'll end this little podcast here, and let's do another 18th edition one next. Yeah, let's move on to another subject. See you soon.